It's a pleasure tonight to introduce a young birder. And as I told Alex, the young birder in our world is an oxymoron because we're all at the retirement end of the spectrum. But then he lives in an enormous urban metropolitan area. He tells me 2.5 million people, and he guarantees not every one of them is a gambler. I would have thought that was the way of being in life, but no, maybe not. Anyway, uh, Alex is going to give us an interesting talk tonight about the birds of the Mojave Desert. And I was just telling him that the first time I ever heard a cactus wren was not surprisingly in the Mojave Desert. And that was quite a thrill to see and hear one of those beautiful birds. So Alex is going to be talking about these birds tonight. And as you see, he works for the Red Rock Audubon Society, which is based in Las Vegas, and he's the education and outreach director. So I'm really pleased that we are able to entertain him, and he'll be able to entertain us tonight. So, Alex.
Thank you, Barry, for the introduction, and thank you all for this opportunity. I am tuning in from my small apartment in Las Vegas, not very far from the Strip, not very far from the very busy airport. And I just returned from a camping trip with one of my friends. We went camping about an hour south of Las Vegas last night. We woke up in a beautiful Joshua tree forest. And surrounded by the Joshua trees were a number of different shrubs, including creosotes and cacti such as cholla and barrel cactus. And we had species such as cactus wrens. We had a gilded flicker. We don't always see those, black-throated sparrows, and a number of different species that have a wide distribution across the West, such as brewer sparrows and western meadowlarks. So these are the types of birds that we're getting at some of our habitats here in the Mojave Desert. I have the title here, Through the Seasons, Bird Diversity in Southern Nevada, and this is the same presentation as my Mojave presentation. So I know many of you saw the title and were like, wait, what? I thought this was on the Mojave. It's the same presentation, and I've given this several times now, and I make little tweaks here and there. I just made a couple tweaks to this presentation tonight because I got back from my trip and thought, you know what, there's just one more thing I want to add. So it's still this work in progress. And I love talking about this desert ecosystem here. A little bit about myself before we dive in. I have a background as an avian biologist, moved out here from South Florida a couple of years ago, actually starting in 2015. I came out for a couple different jobs working in the renewables as a biologist, doing impact assessments on a variety of solar and eventually wind projects. And then I started to work in other areas of the Mojave Desert, down in Palm Springs, and eventually down in the Sonoran Desert, so all the way down near the Salton Sea and Anza Borrego. I've been down in New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona, working in renewables as well. And eventually I decided I wanted to work more in science communications and education. So I made the transition from being happily employed as a biologist to starting my own business, where I wanted to become an educator who worked with nonprofits and different organizations to help them establish a series of education programs and really engage the public. So Red Rock Audubon is my main client. I am also on the board of directors. It's interesting how we work that out, but I am a contractor with Red Rock sort of indefinitely at this point. And in this process, I've learned a lot about the Mojave Desert and how to communicate about the Mojave Desert, because to the public, the desert is this landscape that is barren and lifeless, and the desert is a pretty hard sell. But here in the Mojave, we have so many different interesting species, and I want to tell you a little bit about how to see the Mojave Desert and understand the Mojave Desert. And so to do that, we're going to go over some general patterns. So this is what I have lined up for you today. My hopes and my intentions for you is that you're going to leave with a stronger understanding of the climate and the Mojave and how these birds are influenced by these environmental factors. I want you to have a better understanding of the different plant communities and life zones here. these patterns that exist throughout the year, and of course, to understand a little bit more of the challenges that these birds um, are currently experiencing, and the possible things that we can do to assist these birds in their habitats. And if you ever come to Las Vegas, and eventually you will, if you haven't yet, I will show you a couple very interesting places to go birding. We do have birds in Las Vegas, quite a few of them actually. So you're over in the Sierras, the west side of it. And so you're having these coastal influences and a lot more moisture than we're getting here. But I want to go over what makes a desert first. So many of you have been to the desert. You're not far away from it, but let's just go over what makes the desert, and then what makes the Mojave distinct from the other ones. So a desert can be defined as any habitat that is receiving 10 inches or less of precipitation on average annually. And another way to think about it is that these regions also are losing more water to evaporation than they are to precipitation or moisture retention in some way. So they're losing more water than they're actually gaining, at least in the meteorological terms. We're not talking about rivers or anything like that. Because if we counted the Colorado River, that would disqualify this, right? So we're completely talking about atmospheric moisture here. And then we have 4 North American deserts. If you've ever been to Big Bend down in Texas, you're going to be in the Chihuahuan Desert. If you're in El Paso or Las Cruces, that's this pretty cold and moist desert in the southeastern part of the Southwest. Then you have the Sonoran Desert. If you're going down to Tucson or Phoenix, you're going to be in the Sonoran. So think about your big saguaro cactus and ocotillo. To the north of us, we have Grayson. So that's going to be a very cold and fairly damp and wet desert. They get a lot of precipitation in the form of snowfall. Think about sagebrush and rabbit brush and lots of pinyon juniper, and even in the valleys. And for us here in the Mojave Desert, we are a hot and dry desert. So it's receiving about 4 inches of rainfall, or excuse me, precipitation annually, and that's going to come in this form of snowfall or rainfall. So you can actually see the Mojave is quite small. And if you've ever seen Joshua trees, they're actually a type of yucca. They are found almost entirely within the Mojave Desert. In fact, they are a indicator species for us in the Mojave Desert. If you find Joshua trees, you're surely in the Mojave. They kind of make up all the boundaries there. So the range of the Mojave is the range of the Joshua tree. And you can see here that we are in the Pacific Flyway, technically, in the Mojave Desert. And that's the same one that you're in, but we get substantially less migratory birds than you all that are between the coast of California and the western edge of the Sierra Nevada. Most of the birds in the Pacific Flyway are flying in that range. And we do get some birds, and many of them are the same migratory species as you get here. But I think that they are wired to favor areas that have more moisture and more canopy cover, especially for these migratory songbirds. So they're going to be more in your neck of the woods. We get many of the same species here in the Mojave Desert. And for us here in Nevada, and I'm very Nevada centric, but you get this in other areas of the Mojave. So, Death Valley and even down in the Joshua Tree area of California, the Western Mojave, you get very similar things going on here with our topography. But in Nevada, what's really interesting is we have these north-south orientations of these mountain ranges. We have about 330 mountain ranges just in Nevada, running down into California in many cases, and they're all oriented north-south. That happens to be the directions that many of these birds are following in Nevada, at least in the southern Mojave area. So a hypothetical route for some of these songbirds would be cutting across these mountains, which have more water, usually in the form of snow melt running into the spring, or maybe they have pools of water that collect and they have more tall trees like ponderosa pine, like aspen, like bristlecone pine. And that's what these birds are doing when they're migrating through the Mojave Desert. They are taking these mountain ranges that run north-south already, and they're avoiding the valleys because in the valleys, there's not a lot of cover. So just like you all um, in the Sierra, we have a lot of birds going to these small creeks that will form at the end of the winter time when water's starting to run off away from these snowbanks. And these are great, excellent areas to find some birds. What you're looking at here is a female or a young Western tanager. You know, we're looking at a songbird here that is a little bit smaller than a robin. And one of the ways you can tell it's a Western tanager is that overall lemony yellow wash to the head running down into the breast without really any streaking or patterning on the breast and belly. And I see that grayish dark back with two distinct wing bars. And I'm looking at those wing bars and the combination of other features of this bird, the color and the shape, and um, guess at size, and thinking, okay, this is a Western tanager. So I can't talk about the birds coming through this area without talking a little bit about migration and how it's working. So let's imagine that it's a couple months ago, right before we got to about Christmas time and the winter solstice. You rewind the clock a little bit and you get to the fall equinox. And you have this really big or amount of time difference of, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. You have a really big difference in the duration of daylight. So moving out of the fall equinox, you're going to have a lot more darker days and less minutes per day in the northern latitudes than you would all the way down here in the Mojave. And so what's happening is with less and less daylight up there, there's less warm temperatures, and you'll start to get this colder air start to compact. Cold air, once it gets very pressurized, it wants to go outwards. And so then you start to get these cold fronts starting around the fall. And those cold fronts are going to begin to advance into these other areas where we're having a little bit more daylight per day. We're not losing those minutes as quickly as those northern latitudes. And it's in those northern latitudes where that cold air is starting to come down. Now, those are going to get stronger and stronger throughout the fall. And the more frequent and stronger and more intense cold wind are going to come down and provide these wonderful tailwinds for many of our migratory birds. So those are going to include many of our songbirds, and that's going to push them farther south and assist them. Remember, these birds do not want to migrate into a headwind. They want to go with a tailwind. And so we're going to look at how some of these patterns are going to affect the birds throughout the year and what they're doing and the habitats that you can find them in. But before we do that, I want to show you kind of the different plant communities that we have here in the Mojave Desert. And I am not an artist, but I had a lot of fun making this on a PowerPoint presentation. So what we'll look at is that very bottom part of the screen, the bottom right. And that's going to be let's say that that's a riparian area. It's a wetland. It can be like the Colorado River. That's our main river here in the Mojave Desert. There is the Mojave River that runs down in Southern California, fairly close to Apple Valley in the San Bernardino area, but not too many rivers here. We have a couple small streams and wetlands, and around there you can find cottonwoods and Gooding's willows. That's where you're going to find things like summer tanager. You're going to find yellow-breasted chat, southwestern willow flycatcher, the occasional yellow-billed cuckoo, indigo bunting, or excuse me, lazuli buntings. Indigo buntings are very rare here in the Mojave, and Bullock's orioles. And if you start to go and gain some elevation, you're going to get into the creosote-dominated shrublands. These are going to be our low valleys, and that's going to be like surrounding Las Vegas. Or if you went into Death Valley and the east side of the Sierra and started to go into the Mojave, you're going to know you're in the Mojave Desert because you're going to start to see these creosote shrubs at very low elevation. So when you're heading down towards Southern California and it's arid, start looking for the creosote. It's going to really help be an indicator for you that you are now in the Mojave Desert. Now, if you start gaining a little elevation, you'll start to notice that you lose your creosotes and you start to see more of your Joshua trees and you'll also your black brush. These are going to be sometimes your most dominant species at that elevation of about 3,000 to 5,500 feet. Keep gaining more and more elevation, and you'll quickly find another plant community, your pinyon juniper woodlands. And you're also going to find your mountain mahogany and a couple scrub oaks. Start looking for woodhouses, scrub jays, spotted towhees, juniper titmice, chucker are a non-native species that we're usually finding in that pinyon juniper woodland, and we'll get gray vireo and Scott's orioles in that habitat in the spring and summer. Moving up into the montane area, it's going to be a lot like the Sierra. So we're going to start looking for ruby crown kinglet, and we're going to look for northern flickers breeding up there, mountain chickadee, bush tit, red crossbill, evening grosbeak, Clark's nutcracker, Steller's jay. We actually have these birds just outside of Las Vegas here and in some of our really high mountains in the Mojave Desert. We actually have these birds, and these larger mountain range act as sky islands in the Mojave Desert. Now you get a little bit higher up, and some of your last trees are going to be your bristlecone pines. And once you get up to tree line at about 11,000 feet, you're going to have mostly just, gravel and some small herbaceous plants. And you're going to get a pretty alpine habitat. And in some areas of the Mojave, you can get rock wrens breeding up there, but not much else. You get common ravens and golden eagles, peregrine falcons moving over, of course. And I've seen white-throated swifts at just about every single habitat, at every elevation you can imagine. They're just truly an incredible Mojave species. So to help illustrate these points, here's a little bit of where some of these birds are going to be found. Down in your creosote, look for black-throated sparrows in the Joshua tree. Blackbrush habitat, look for mountain bluebirds in the wintertime. And as you start getting farther up these mountains in the Mojave, look for spotted towhee, canyon wrens, goshawks, and of course those birds of prey, white-throated swifts. All right, we've talked about some of the driving forces for these birds. I hope that I've illustrated this environment and this climate a little bit. Let's talk about overall patterns. And if you walk away from this, with anything, it's that you have a larger appreciation for the overall patterns that are driving bird behavior and bird distribution here in the Mojave Desert. So let's pretend it's right now. We don't need to pretend because it is wintertime. It's wintertime in the Mojave Desert. And this is the overall pattern of what these birds are doing. For the most part, are insectivores. So these are our insect-eating birds. Think of your warblers and your vireos and your flycatchers. Most of them are in areas of the Sonoran Desert, Mexico, Central America, even South America, where insect activity is always high. It's consistent throughout the wintertime. That's where those birds want to be. They don't want to be here because it actually gets pretty cold. Right now where I am, it's in the 30s already, and the sun just went down. So not a lot of insect activity. Many of those insectivores are gone. Our waterfowl numbers are at their highest. Our wetlands and our lakes remain ice-free all winter. So we are having lots of waterfowl continue to come in here. Even as winter goes on, many more birds are coming in because farther north, some of the ponds are getting a little more frozen over. Our seed-eating birds, they find food all winter, so our finches and our sparrows in particular, and our wetlands are super vibrant with life. So let's check out some photos. You have a mixed group of dabbling ducks here. These are female northern pintails, and there's some green-winged teals mixed in. We get the occasional cackling geese and snow geese joining Canada geese in many areas of the Mojave Desert where there is water, where there is any sort of lawn or agricultural area in particular, which there aren't that many of them. They tend to congregate here in the Las Vegas area. At reservoirs in the Mojave Desert, we'll get the occasional scoter. And scoters are usually associated with being closer to coastal areas. We call them sea ducks. But we actually have in many of our ecosystems, our aquatic ecosystems here, introduced quagga mussels. And scoters love to eat these bivalves, these hard-shelled, calcitic-shelled organisms. And they will dive down off of beaches at places like Lake Mead and eat these invasive species. So this is one of those weird occasions where the introduction of a non-native species provides a diet for a species that ordinarily wouldn't be here if it weren't for this newly available prey item. So kind of interesting. We get the occasional bald eagles coming in. Some people are surprised to learn that bald eagles can be found in the Mojave region, but they're only going to be in areas in the wintertime, really, where there is solid large fish supply. So that's going to be at places like Lake Mead. You can also go to Paranagit National Wildlife Refuge. That is at the very edge of the Mojave Desert. And you probably can get them at Ash Meadows, but I would be shocked if you got them at many of the Mojave sites in California. You just don't get a lot of water in that part of the Mojave. Although I know there are areas of Southern California that you can find bald eagles fairly easily. Now, these birds are interesting. This is the mountain bluebird. This is Nevada's state bird. And this year I've seen very few mountain bluebirds, whereas last year there were many. They were absolutely everywhere. And what I think happened is there was a crash in their food items. They're usually eating fruit in the wintertime, this species, throughout the east side of the Sierra, going into the Great Basin deserts, the Mojave Desert. And they couldn't find food in places that most of the birds in a population used to finding. So they went way south into the Mojave Desert and they started to eat a lot of desert mistletoe. That's the same fruit that phainopeplas eat while they're here. And we saw a lot more waxwings and bluebirds here last year than this year. I think this year, what they're eating in most of their winter range is around in more abundance. And so they're not driven to congregate here. And so if you're a new birder, this is a lesson that you can take from this. When you start to spend more years birding, you will start to see that the things that you thought were normal your first year aren't always normal. If there were birders starting out in Las Vegas last winter or the Mojave last winter, they would have assumed that the mountain bluebird was one of the most common birds you will ever see, whereas this year, they're just not really around as much. I don't think that the population has declined so much in 1 or 2 years. I think what happened is they just followed their food, and the food isn't here right now. They're somewhere else, and it's just one of those things to look out for. And one of the very exciting things about birding for multiple years, you start to notice small patterns and then really big, long patterns over the course of decades. And of course, we get our snow. We have ponderosa and aspen forests in many of our larger mountains. Admittedly, I took this photo in Utah, just outside of the Mojave Desert, but the same species are found here. And I want to put the spotlight on some of our really amazing wintering species, like our mountain chickadees. Mountain chickadees there are two remarkable adaptations that they have that I really want to talk about for the wintertime. The first thing is that these tiny little birds, starting in the fall, they start to go through hormonal changes that signal to the brain to expand the neural density of their hippocampus. Now, like us, like what we have and the function of our hippocampus, it's very similar for chickadees and some of these scatter hoarders like nuthatches and jays. Some of our corvids, these are also scatter hoarders like the chickadee. They start to stash food throughout the fall with the intention of visiting their stashes throughout the winter to find food. This is very important for their survival. If they didn't have this ability, they wouldn't remember where they stored all this food and they would die, and we wouldn't be talking about them today. And so they're able to find food throughout the fall and stash them, remember where it is, and continue to go through them because of the ability to expand that hippocampus, which is associated with memory and banking new memory. The other thing that they're able to do that I think is really remarkable is their ability to go through big swings in their body temperature throughout the night. So they'll have an active daytime body temperature that for us would be a devastating fever, and we would die from that fever at that temperature. I think it's sitting around 105 or 106 Fahrenheit. And then it'll drop into the low 80s at night. So they'll really slow down their metabolism. And then, daylight hits the next day, and they're back at it, these mountain chickadees. Now, many of chickadees are able to do this, and there are other small birds that have these adaptations in cold climates. And that's why these birds can do what they do and not need to migrate, because they can do things that other songbirds just simply cannot. Really, really remarkable. So that was wintertime. Now we're transitioning into springtime. And I think spring for us starts in mid-March. That's when we start to get some of our Lucy's warblers and our hooded orioles, our swallows, yellow-headed blackbirds, they start to come in. And a waterfowl start to move out. And we'll start to get more bird song in our lowlands and the high elevations, like where the mountain chickadees are. It's still functionally winter in those climates, but it'll start to get louder and louder as March moves to April, April to May. And, just here in Clark County, where I am, in the Mojave Desert, it's a big county, 8,000 square miles. We'll have big day birders go out and they'll get 150 to 170 species just in a day by hitting multiple habitats, all the Mojave habitats. And that's what they can come up with. So there is diversity here in much of the Mojave. So let's talk about spring. Here's some waterfowl moving out. We will get shorebirds moving into our area. Here you're looking at a lesser yellowlegs, and you're also looking at the range map there. So these lesser yellowlegs, they'll be leaving western Mexico, Baja. There are a couple down in the Salton Sea area and coastal California, of course, because coastal Southern California has absolutely everything at some point during the year. It's not fair. And so these lesser yellowlegs, they'll be passing through the Mojave and other areas of the West, heading into their boreal forest habitat of Canada and Alaska. So we'll get shorebirds at many of our waterways and our wetlands. Side note, if you're struggling with your yellowlegs, let's take a look really quickly at this bird's bill and compare that bill length to the length of its head. And you'll notice that they're about the same length. That bill length is about the same length as its head. And if it were a greater yellowlegs, the bird that is usually the cause for confusion when looking at yellowlegs and these types of shorebirds, it would have a much larger bill. It would be much larger than the length of the bird's head. And you might even notice that it looks slightly upturned as well. So a great opportunity to look at our lesser yellowlegs a little bit more in depth. We'll get many of the black-headed grosbeaks that you also get in your part of the Sierra. These birds are passing through the Mojave Desert in pretty decent numbers. And then we transition into summer. Summer is really challenging here. And so, of course, we have a huge range in elevation here in the Mojave Desert. You can be down near the Colorado River at 1,400 feet in elevation, and you can be at your highest elevation in the Mojave at 12,000 feet. So we're looking at almost 11,000 feet of variation in elevation. And of course, what that means is when it's it's springtime in the low elevations, it still feels like winter way up high. And when it's, well into spring here at our low elevations, it's just starting to feel like spring at those high elevations, right? Because there's a relationship between elevation and temperature. So I like to think of it as summer being staggered up at higher elevations because everything's just a little bit more behind. In our lowlands, our birds might breed several times. It all depends on food availability. And a lot of our food availability depends on our winter rains or the amount of runoff from snow melt. So just like you all had a really wild year last year of snow, when we had a lot of snow here last winter, a lot of that water continued to run off well into the spring and dampen many of our valleys. And that really put this boom in insect life. And so we had a lot of birds breed several times. That wasn't happening in 2020, for example, when we had a record amount of time without rainfall. No birds really bred during that time. It was eerily quiet. So a lot of it has to do with the winter precipitation conditions going into the spring and the summer. This is a ubiquitous bird. Many of you know this one. This is one of our summer residents in many Mojave areas. This is your northern mockingbird. The lesser goldfinch is a summer species that you can find in most Mojave habitats from the creosote shrublands, so those really big open valleys, and just about anywhere that you find a little bit of water, and especially anything with seed heads, you're going to find lesser goldfinches. And I want to pause really quickly and talk about a sort of more universal theme amongst the diets of finches and the New World sparrows. So these are going to be any of the sparrows and any of the finches that you're getting in your part of California and all the Mojave, is that finches will mostly eat seeds throughout the year, and they'll feed insects to their young, but for the most part, they're going after seeds almost exclusively. Sparrows, on the other hand, they have a summer diet of mostly insects, and it's in the fall and the winter time that they switch to seeds. So we look at these birds and think sometimes, oh, well, they're all seed eaters. They're all eating the same things throughout the year. And that's not true. There is a big difference between the finches and the sparrows in their summer and winter diets. So sparrows are feeding on a lot of insects in the summer. Finches are still going after seeds. Now, Barry mentioned that he saw some cactus wrens in the Mojave not too long ago that caught his attention. And for us, we do really well with wren diversity here in the Mojave area. We've got Buick's wren, we've got rock wrens, canyon wrens. In the wintertime, we'll get Pacific wrens coming into the area. And of course, house wrens are even around at the higher elevations, singing in some of our meadows in the Mojave Desert mountains. One of the cool things about these two birds is that you can find them side by side, and they're closely related genetically. And you can tell that when you see them and you really look at their patterns and their behavior. But the canyon wren is a bird that loves the vertical realm, and then the rock wren will be found in the washes or the canyon floor. So you get them very closely, but actually they partition themselves vertically, which I think is really neat. And the canyon wren, that to me is one of the most iconic sounds of the Southwest in the Mojave Desert. I know that you get them in California too, outside of the Mojave Desert. But for me, it is just such a Southwestern sound. Whenever I hear it, I think of canyons in Utah and the Grand Canyon and around here in all parts of the Mojave. Now, in some of our high elevations, we get some species that you're also getting in the Sierra. You get your pygmy nuthatches. And I can't remember if you get Clark's nutcrackers that far west, but I do know that they're in some parts of California. And the Clark's nutcracker is a corvid, so related to magpies, related to jays. They have a extremely important role in our coniferous forests. And what they're doing primarily for us here in the Mojave is they are moving between mountain ranges or valleys in mountain ranges, and they're taking these seeds of bristlecone pine and limber pine and moving those seeds throughout these regions. And they're the primary seed dispersants for those pines that I just mentioned. The pygmy nuthatch has a similar role, but with the ponderosa pine. And they're not moving big distances like the Clark's nutcrackers. Clark's nutcrackers will move many miles and spread those seeds far and wide. Pygmy nuthatches do that on a more local level. And they are a bird that is dependent on ponderosa pines here for most parts of their life cycle. And of course, we have an iconic bird that is found in the Great Basin Desert and the Mojave. This is a bird that has about half of their population in Nevada. Most of Nevada is Great Basin Desert, so it is not just a Mojave bird, but it is mostly a Nevada bird. I've seen pretty good flocks in the Death Valley area of the Mojave. Actually, probably one of the biggest flocks I've seen outside of Utah. And what's really interesting about these birds is they have an intimate relationship with the pinyon pine. The pinyon pine is a very familiar pine throughout most of the West. You do get it on the east side of the Sierra at elevations of about 4, 5, maybe 5,500 feet, usually around junipers. And this bird in the late summer into early fall will be harvesting fresh pinyon pines, and they will be taking them off. And like the chickadee, they are scatter hoarding them throughout the environment, usually at an elevation that is not covered completely in snow for most of the winter. The important thing there is that they are returning to those spots and hoping or somehow factoring in that most of these areas are not going to be covered in snow, so they can retrieve the pine seeds that they hid in the late summer, early fall, and have things to eat throughout the wintertime. Now, they're going to forget some of them. They do have, they don't have the perfect memory. So they will leave some of those seeds or forget them. Maybe the bird dies actually. Maybe it's eaten by a sharp-shinned hawk or a Cooper's hawk in the middle of the winter. And now a seed germinates and they have propagated another pinyon pine. And so these types of relationships exist with many of our birds here in the Mojave Desert. And so for us, when we're thinking about conservation of these birds, we're thinking about, not just the bird, but the plant that they have the relationship with. Because if we lose this bird, then the pinyon pine loses its main seed dispersant. And if there are less of those pinyon pines, well, it's harder for the pinyon jay to recover. So there is a relationship here that we are all thinking about in conservation of these birds. And here's a very overzealous pinyon jay taking an entire pine cone. And I took this photo and sent it to some friends and that worked for Great Basin Bird Observatory. And it turned out to be one of the few photos of a pinyon jay carrying an entire pine cone. So that photo has been circulated a couple times. So let's talk about fall, and then I think we're just about going to wrap up the patterns and talk about a couple last things and then open up to questions and things like that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about our mid-August to late October. This is our fall migration. So we started off in the winter. We looked at some of our spring themes in the Mojave into summer, and then finally into fall. So when you start to get birds heading back to Mono Lake and the east side of the Sierra, we're also getting many of the same species of birds, lots of Wilsons and red-necked phalarope, many American avocets. Many of them are coming out of parts of the lower 48, like the Wilson's phalaropes and the avocets. And we're getting shorebirds from the tundra, like our yellow-legged solitary sandpipers, and finally even the Arctic. So pictorial sandpipers and the occasional Baird sandpiper, western sandpiper, semi-palmated sandpiper birds like those. Our insectivores start to move back down, and they're trying to get ahead of those cold fronts that I talked about earlier. They cannot afford to be here when the cold weather shuts down insect activity, unless, of course, you're a yellow-rumped warbler or a ruby-crowned kinglet. Those are two of our only insectivores to stay here all winter long because they're fairly hardy and adaptable generalists. Following these songbirds are sharp-shinned hawks and American kestrels, merlins, and Cooper's hawks. You might have noticed that sharp-shinned hawks migrate around the same time as many of your migratory songbirds, and that's because they're following their prey. Those migratory songbirds are heading south following the insects, the insect activity, and following them are the small birds of prey that eat the songbirds. So some of those birds are migrating down, and some of the last birds to come down in the fall in the Mojave include our woodpeckers, so red-naped sapsucker and northern flickers will start to come down in October. Finally, our bluebirds, robins, Townsend solitaires, sparrows, and then finches in October. Here are some of our shorebirds that we'll get in the fall. So American avocet, long-billed dowitcher at your top right, the killdeer, which many of us are very familiar with, and at least sandpipers with those droopy bills and those yellow legs. We'll get the black-throated gray warblers and Wilson's warblers. We'll get Virginias, Townsends, not nearly as many hermit warblers as you get in your part of California, but they'll start to pass through the Mojave. We get just about the same species of warblers as you do. American kestrels, of course, they're following those warblers and those songbirds south. Northern flickers show up in October. And we all know this bird, the bird with many different dialects, the white-crowned sparrow. These are birds that have some of the highest numbers of types of songs. They have different dialects, these birds. And so the ones that are breeding in your high alpine altitudes of the Sierra have different songs than the ones breeding on the coast of California. And those have different dialects than the birds breeding in the mountains of northern Nevada. We get plenty of these too, yellow-rumped warblers. And now we've gone through that full cycle. It's late fall and those ducks are starting to head back into the Mojave. So I'd like to talk about just some of the simple things that we can do. You've probably seen these some of these graphics before, but some things that we can do to help these birds in the Mojave Desert. And you know, some of the most impactful things that we do here, or what you can do where you are, I'm sure, wherever you're tuning in from, is we're really big on our native plants here. We definitely emphasize keeping our cats indoors in many of our cities and towns in the Mojave Desert. Of course, making windows safer is big as well. And then more specific actions for us in the Mojave Desert is, you know, we need to advocate for our wetlands and our watersheds. And we share a lot of the same watersheds, maybe not for you on the west side of the Sierra, but the east side of the Sierra. All that snowpack that you got last winter, a lot of that melted off and went right into the Mojave Desert and really moistened up our valleys. Death Valley and the west side of the Mojave really benefited from that. And so we're all connected, and the precipitation that you all got up there that was really problematic for people and actually dangerous, I understand, but it really replenished us. And what I think it did is it bought us time for us that are thinking about conservation here, because a lot of our deserts were not faring well. They're very depleted of water in some ways. So we can also help land managers like the Bureau of Land Management think about sensitive sites and migratory corridors and stopover areas. The reason that I mentioned that is that for us in the Mojave Desert, we're going to get a lot of solar development in the next few years. And it's very important that we have more renewable sources. But what is also going to happen is this is going to be the Wild West of development, and the Bureau of Land Management is the agency that issues those permits, and they're understaffed and overwhelmed, and they have too much to do. And so whenever it's possible to get involved, I know each Audubon chapter has their own capacity, but talking to those BLM agencies, going to public hearings and talking about important and sensitive areas that might be migratory corridors for certain species can be really important, because they may not be able to be thinking about the impacts of the impending large-scale developments that are going to be spread across the landscape of the West for a very long time, kind of indefinitely. And we definitely can do more here in our chapter to do that. We're really big on planting native or at least drought-tolerant species of shrubs and trees. Of course, connecting with partners in other chapters like what we're doing tonight is helpful. We all know that cats are a big topic. And what I've personally had a little bit more luck with is when I'm talking to people about cats who have outdoor cats, and I want to bring some awareness to what cats are doing to our native animal populations, is what I'll say is, hey, I'll say, look, like what we do know is that birds are most active in the morning and the evening. So if you keep your cats in for the morning and the evening or late afternoon, maybe let them out in the middle of the day, bring them in before late afternoon, then those cats are not out at the time where they're most likely to catch birds, because the birds are less active. Other things that we can do is say, okay, if you're not willing to keep your cats inside, what about if you had them inside for the 2 or 3 months of baby bird season? So bring them in April and don't let them back out until July, because a lot of these cats are catching birds at those times. So little things that maybe we can do to help people start small and then maybe make those transitions. It's kind of like people changing their diet. Sometimes it's hard for them to go cold turkey. They just need to start small, then they come around. But maybe that's wishful thinking. And then, connect with other bird observatories. I know that you probably have a couple bird observatories that operate differently from Audubon chapters. And for us, we get a lot of our information from Great Basin Bird Observatory. They do a lot of our science in the Great Basin and Mojave Desert. They really should change their name because they do more than Great Basin. And they give us the science, and then we educate about the science that they collect. We don't need to do science. We just need to have strong partnerships with other scientists. They tell us what's most important to think about, and then we create the educational programming. So we have a good relationship with some of them, other agencies around. When you come to Las Vegas and you eventually come to the Strip for a show or a shotgun Elvis wedding, keep in mind that we have lots of really cool spots to go birding around here. And I put some stars next to those sites. And you might notice on the east side, there's some places like the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve and Clark County Wetlands. These are areas where there's lots of water, because Las Vegas, like many of the areas in the Mojave Desert, they're in these valleys. And at the east side of this valley where Las Vegas is, that's the lower part of the valley where water has flown into. And because water flows there, that's where our wetland sites are. So the best birds are on the east side of town because that's where all the water is. You can apply that knowledge to any time that you're birding in a valley. The lowest part is usually going to be where the water congregates, and that's where you're going to find a lot of bird species. Now, it doesn't have to be just those locations. It looks like you can go anywhere in town and be around some pretty good birding. So I usually aim to make these about 45 minutes long. We started a little after 7, so we did a pretty good job tonight. And if you want to stay in touch for some reason, you have questions about the Mojave Desert, where to go birding in Nevada or Southern California, you can always shoot me an email. I've kind of been all around the deserts around here, and I am super busy, but I'm always happy to help or point you in the right direction. And every now and then through Red Rock Audubon Society, we put on free presentations. Some that I've done in the past are birding by ear, raptor identification in the Southwest, and Mojave reptiles. So when we do those in the future, I will make sure that I send those over to your chapter so that you also know about them. They're completely free, and we just want to make sure that they're nice and open. But I can't promise that we'll be doing them anytime soon. We just don't have one set up. So, but keep an eye out. I will let you all know the next time that I have that. So, I'll let you know. And at this point, we can wrap up. I'm happy to stick around for longer than 15 minutes. I'm really passionate about the birds in the Mojave Desert and want to make sure that I get to any questions or comments that come my way. So maybe Barry will field them, or maybe they'll go to the chat and we can talk about them through the chat.
Alex, thank you very much. That was an absolute tour de force, and I do get your passion for birds and birding. That's quite fantastic. And actually, you've inspired me because you've talked about the solar panels in the desert. Well, I should be attending a Sierra Club meeting in about a month's time in Shoshone, where we'll be talking about just those things. It's a desert community, so we'll be talking about those things because you're right. There's so much damage being done by those solar panels. But anyway, I shall also be spending about a month around that area, Shoshone, Ash Meadows Natural Wildlife Refuge, and Death Valley. So I'm going to be looking out for the bald eagle at Ash Meadows that you mentioned. So I'm looking forward to it. But this has been a fantastic presentation. I love the combination of the birds along with their environment and how they adapt to the environment. That was a great tour de force to put that together. That combination is just a fantastic integration. So I'd like to compliment you and thank you very much for doing that. And with that, I should ask if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for
Thank you
joining.
so much. Good night.
Thanks, Barry.